So there's obviously a lot of concerned residents that people are not happy and asking questions. Next one. So if we play these videos, this is actually from my back patio. Those trees are 25 meters tall, so that helicopter is flying around 30 meters above my property. Okay, the next one. I'm going to play them both at the same time. Okay, so I didn't get any notice that there was going to be pesticides dropped from the air. Now, I have to tell you something that 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with an incurable disease. My doctor said, you have 6 months before you will be bound to a wheelchair if you don't accept treatment. I didn't think the treatment was right for me, so I went on a different path, and I cleaned up my lifestyle. And after that, my daughter was diagnosed with a whole bunch of problems. And finally, my husband came with a lung condition, which was associated with the mosquito spray in Coomera, where we used to live. The doctor said, you need a biopsy. You should not be alive. I don't know how you got to my clinic. So we said, what do we do? He said, move. Because these pesticides feed molds, and you're allergic to mold. And if you continue living where you're living, you're going to die. That was Tuesday. We moved on Friday. We did all sorts of natural therapies. I'm not going to tell you that I found a cure. I've got, healing is multimodal, and look, I'm not in a wheelchair, and my husband is in the back, and he's breathing and walking. He can run faster than me still. But then we were aerial baited with pesticides, chemical pesticides, without any warning. My husband's blood oxygen level dropped to 90%. So I don't know if that means anything to you, but if you're in the hospital and your blood oxygen level drops to 96%, they don't let you leave the hospital. This is directly on day 4 of aerial baiting. Okay, well, I don't know. Is it related? I don't know. That's yet to be proved, I guess. We need all the evidence we can get. And then my daughter and I are now experiencing problems, medical problems, and I still didn't make the connection. And then my cat got sick. She had to have emergency surgery for uterus infection in her uterus. These are all endocrine disruptors, these pesticides, these chemicals that they're using. So now I'm starting to make the connection. Something's wrong here. Something's not right. We have to report these things. We have to get some medical tests. We have to do some investigations, and many people have been doing their own investigations. And then in March, shortly after the aerial baiting, I get a knock on the door, probably the 5th or 4th one, because the first couple times I treated the biosecurity officers like salesmen. No, thank you, I'm not interested. If you come to my house, I will take you for a walk around my property. I have 21 fruit trees, an extensive veggie garden, and we pull weeds by hand on our acreage. Thanks, Cameron, by the way, for weed pulling. Okay, so pesticides on my property, no thank you. I'm not buying what you're selling, I'm not interested. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have a choice. And we have the authority, without your consent, to come on your property. Oh, is this true? No, I have medical conditions. I moved here, I poured my life savings into creating a healthy lifestyle for my family because our health depends on it. Not because I have a green thumb and I love hard labor in the garden. I don't even love doing these things for half the time. But our life literally depends on it. And we moved, we made all the changes, and now I've got a biosecurity officer telling me I have no choice in the matter, that they're coming to put chemical pesticides on my property. Well, I said, I have a reasonable excuse from the limited information that I had. I thought, surely just give me a fine, take me to court, I'll present it to the judge. This is not reasonable that you can just come on here. There were 2 biosecurity officers with cameras and 10 ground crew. And I was home alone by myself. And I was told, this is happening today. We are baiting your property. Oh, no, you can't do this. I've worked way too hard to create this healthy environment for me and my family. Well, they mobilized themselves against my concerns. They ignored my reasonable grounds, and they said, this is happening, and they proceeded to bait my property. The whole time I followed them, I said, this is not right. No, I do not consent. We have to agree to disagree, they said, okay? I said, no, it's not okay. At no time did I concede that that was okay, and at no time did they give me the courtesy or the opportunity to have my reasonable grounds heard. Okay, so that happened. My property was baited. Okay, it happened. I don't know what my rights are. I'm just a common person, not really interested in this stuff. And this is a total inconvenience right now. But now I have to become a lawyer, apparently, and find out my rights. So I called a lawyer, and I said to my lawyer, this has just happened. What do I do? She said, that was a violation. Oh, really? Yes. And I will draft you a letter of demand to them so that they can't come on your property anymore. And you will have the opportunity to present your reasonable grounds. And if they dismiss that, then we will apply for an injunction. Okay, let's do it. So now I'm spending money on this. Not only am I spending time and my health, I'm now spending money on a lawyer to protect my rights, which were violated apparently on that day. So that has happened, and now biosecurity have given me the luxury to prove that their chemicals are safe. They want me to go and get water testing. I'll show you. We can go back and forth, but just going through a few slides, just go forward a little bit, Peter.
Next slide.
Yep, next slide. Next slide. This is what I want to show you. This is before December 2023. They aerial baited in February. This is after. You can see the oil slick on this. After the aerial baiting in August. I have lived on this property for 11 years. My water always looked like this. My dog used to swim in this water. We used to sit here in the summertime. This is rocks and sand. I have never in my decade of living here seen my water look like this. Now, some people will say it's chemical runoff, it's pesticides. Someone said it was inversion because of whatever. Maybe it is. I'm not a water specialist. But for 10 years, it looked like that. And after the chemical treatments, it now looks like this. So don't you think it's reasonable to investigate? Why do I have to get water tests? Water tests cost $5,000, I got a quote. So I have to test that this is safe? Where's the monitoring of the program? Ongoing safety of what they're doing and the pesticides that they're putting out? Where is that? How is that my obligation? Okay? So that happened, and I have more to the story, because guess what? I had a visit from biosecurity and the police this afternoon, right before I got here. So I had sent the letter of demand. I said I have medical concerns and concerns about water contamination. They said, okay, provide evidence. And they also said in that letter to my lawyer, because I don't want this interaction. I don't want to deal with this, okay? So please deal with my lawyer. Please don't come to my house. If I lose and you will beat my property, I am no physical threat. Come on in. But first, I will have my due process, and I will try to keep you off my property because I'm seeing harm being done here, and my family is experiencing harm. So there has to be some kind of due process before you continue to do this on my property, okay? And in that letter, they responded to the letter, and in that letter, they said, your client will no longer be contacted by us, and we will not visit your property unless we give you 7 days notice. Fine, great. This is wonderful. They're not good. It's with the lawyers. It's not in my hands anymore. The law will decide what is fair. But they came today. Knock, knock, knock. Roger Morris, the compliance officer who wrote the letter, is at my front door. And I said, what are you doing here? You've been served with a legal notice. Why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. Go back to the lawyer. Communicate with her. We are here to treat your property unless you can provide reasonable grounds. Reasonable excuse. Oh, okay. I said, please go back, call whoever you need to call to make sure you're supposed to be here. I do have footage. Everything was recorded, and I will release that footage. It just happened this afternoon. Okay. So he went and made his phone call to see if he was supposed to be there. And I made my phone call to my lawyer as well. And I said, hey, this is happening right now. What should I do? She said, they're not supposed to be there. Tell them to leave your property. Okay, I'm covered. I just got my legal advice. So he came back. Okay, he confirmed he's allowed to be there. He's treating today unless I have a reasonable excuse. I said, yes. Okay, I have a reasonable excuse. So I'm supposed to hand that over to you. You want my medical certificates? Okay. So please show me your authority to decide that my excuse is reasonable or it is not, and whether you will proceed with baiting today. Please show me in the legislation where you have that authority as a biosecurity officer. Well, he ratted off section 261 and some other sections that gives him consent to enter my property. Yes, it does, and you are here. And now you're asking me for evidence of my reasonable excuse. I've told you I have one. I've told you it's medical. I told you last time too when you came on the property, but you ignored that. So we're doing this again. And now you're asking for my evidence. So you're asking me to hand over my private medical information to you so you can decide in this moment whether you're going to go ahead with baiting my property. Yes. Okay. I will do that. I will comply. I'm a law-abiding citizen. And I've got police at the bottom of the property, by the way. I will comply. But you have to show me that you have that authority. This went on for an hour. I can fast track because there's lots of speakers. At the end, he conceded he does not have the authority to decide whether my excuse is reasonable or not. And because it's a medical condition, there's a secure link that he will send me where I can submit my medical certificates to be decided. So for 1 hour, this biosecurity officer abused his power, trying to convince me that he has the authority to make the decision and to persuade me to give him that evidence. Later he says it's voluntary. And then later he says that decision doesn't fall on with him. So we are being fed outright lies, okay? And that's not fair. Because I don't want to be in a wheelchair, and I want my husband's lungs to be working properly, and I want my daughter to grow up and have children because she's young and she shouldn't have medical conditions at her age, okay? I am literally fighting for my family's health. So this is no joke. You don't just come on people's properties with police and say you have authority. Show me that authority. So that's what's happening in Benogan. And I'm not the only one. My friend's property was baited yesterday with police presence. And a lot of people have had police at their home whose reasonable excuses were rejected. And probably there's been some violation. So these need to be investigated. So,
Who has the authority?
yes, I'd like to know the answer to that question. The question was, who has the authority? The Biosecurity Act is not clear. It says the landowner can obstruct with a reasonable excuse. I was very clear. I am obstructing you today, and I have a reasonable excuse. And I asked for an hour, who has the authority to decide whether my excuse is reasonable? I'm not sure yet, but apparently I have a link. So that's my experience. Sanford has had their own with water contamination, which is pretty bad too. But just going back to some of those videos, some key things here that I really want you to see is fire ants do not thrive in full canopy forest situations. We kind of know where the ants are in pastures. As you move into the forest, you don't find fire ants anymore. Dr. Robert Puckett, the Invasive Species Council, hosted Dr. Robert Puckett to come and talk to us. And they stopped holding community meetings, and they changed to webinars, and you couldn't comment. They turned the comments off. Why? Because of this seminar. So we can just play that video.
Full canopy forest situation. So I work with a parasitic fly that we release to help manage the United States. I haven't done a very good job, but they did establish and expanded. And so I used to run transect as part of my PhD research. I was wondering, where are these flies hanging out? We developed a trap for them. So we kind of know where the ants are in pasture. So just picture, an overhead map of a pasture where you've got cleared pasture land and a hard fence, and then trees on the other side. So I was running transects across from pasture into the interior of the forest. Also food lures to determine how many fire ants were there, because there's obviously a close association with the parasitic fly and their host. As you move into the forest, you don't find fire ants anymore. Occasionally you'll find some foragers that move from the cleared area into the shady area, foraging, but not mounding, not setting up any mess.
So, from my little suburban block, am I less likely to get fire ants than because I have it heavily vegetated? Compared to my neighbours that do their turf wars and mow their lawn?
Yeah, if you have a neighbor that has a sort of a turf lawn next door, you're likely to have some foraging in your property, but you're less likely to have a colony established in your yard.
So I don't know about you, but our valleys are covered in shaded canopies. So this is not the habitat for fire ants. So why are we being aerial treated with chemical pesticides? Here's another one. I would never recommend to treat for fire ants if you do not know where they are. I don't know. I don't have fire ants on my property. I've never seen a fire ant. I've never seen a fire nest. I know they are here. Not here. I know, are they? I don't know. I've never seen one. But apparently there are some areas that do have them. They're usually open industrial spaces, or if we have found fire ants, I think there was one in Currumbin, which was found in a barrel of hay because it was moved here. It's not somewhere where they can survive and thrive. So again, we can play this video. You can hear it from Dr. Puckett himself.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the other part that I'm learning. I'm getting my arms around the program.
Did you hear what he said? Someone asked, but there's a difference between eradication and containment. Dr. Puckett said, yeah, that's the other part that I'm learning. I'm getting my arms around the program. So I spoke to Dr. Puckett in person in the parking lot after this seminar. We showed him videos of aerial treatment from Benogan that I showed earlier. And his response was, those are canopy trees. They shouldn't be baiting there. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Invasive Species Council, for inviting a world expert entomologist to confirm exactly what we're trying to tell you. I wonder why would they switch from community meetings like this to webinars that have comments off. Couldn't imagine. Yep, next one. So that's our story, and I'm sure I might speak for not just myself, but a few people who have had the same experience. So now you can hear from Sanford and about their water contamination event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Katarzyna. What an experience. Anyone relating to that experience yet? Yes. Yeah. All right. Now, it gets better. So I'd like to introduce you. It doesn't get better, it gets worse.
Yeah, it gets worse.
I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Maguire. Now, Sarah has emerged as a Sanford Valley representative, and I'm not sure you volunteered for that, but you've emerged. And Sarah's a powerhouse, so she's been on, you might have heard her on ABC Radio, she's been interviewed, she's been in a number of news articles. Yesterday she was in Peter Dutton's office talking about the issues there. So Sarah's operating at a very high level here, but and she'll talk about that. But let's just start with what did happen, Sarah, in Sanford Valley on the 26th of May.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming, and it's great to see such a big crowd here tonight. So yeah, I live in Sanford Valley, which is similar to Currumbin. It's beautiful. We got pristine waterways, creeks, surrounded by Mount Nebo, Mount Glorious forests. And, you know, I have 2 children. We play there in the creeks, and I couldn't believe it. I woke up on Sunday, the 26th of May, to the choppers flying around the valley, just swooping. Nobody had a clue what was going on. At one point, there were 3 choppers flying. I have a friend who lives on acreage, and she rang me up and said, "You've got to see what's going on here." And she took some footage, and I'll just play this now.
So now they're over our property spraying. My husband is down the back. We have not consented. We've also sent emails to the aviation company to state that we do not consent to low-flying vehicles over our property. Yet here we are. They're now flying over the boundary of our land and our neighbours. They're within 150 metres of our neighbour's house, which was not supposed to be the case. And they've sprayed my land when I've explicitly said I do not consent. I have livestock, children. They're now spraying over the South Pine River. They've sprayed over the South Pine River now. So that has gone directly into a water source, despite the fact that the regulation and guidelines says that it is dangerous to aquatic life and should not be used near waterways. And they have sprayed it directly over the South Pine River.
So as you could hear, she actually did get notification, but literally on the Friday at about 5 p.m, and these choppers came Sunday morning at 7:30. She had actually put in a request that they do not spray her property, but as you could see, she actually said her husband was in the paddock. It actually went on his head. He was very seriously ill after that. He had red eyes, serious respiratory issues, and we could see it going into the South Pine River. So what's on the next? Later that afternoon, another resident said, "You've got to get up to Dawson Creek," which is another waterway, a beautiful area like this. And so me and that lady and another local, we went up here, and I'll just show you a bit of this video here.
There's more evidence of the pyroproxyphene that was aerial dropped all in this running waterway. You can see these granules everywhere. They are in everything. They are on the rocks. They are in the water. This is not good, and this is not permitted.
Yeah, so as you can see, we found these little yellow corn grit granules, which are the poison baits, the pyriproxyphene, and it was all in the water. If you move on to the next slide.
Oh, it's the other. Oh, that's all right. There was another slide that showed them all close up, but as you can see, they were there. We then went to the South Pine River area where you saw that chopper dropping it, and we found all those granules there as well. And it actually rained that afternoon, so it had diluted the samples. So we gathered water samples from both those water sources. And then literally 4 days after that happened, the fire ant program came to Sanford to tell us what they were doing. And we had a very lively meeting with this guy here. This is Graham Dudgeon. He was the head of operations at that time. The first thing he said when he opened that meeting is, "We're sorry, Sanford, we made a mistake. We baited one of your creeks with the wrong chemical. Our pilot did not realize there was a water source there." So I said, "Well, how did you not know South Pine River was there? You know, that's the main water source." And he said, "Oh, we don't know about that one." But he then goes on to, this is his admission.
Yes, in that. Environmentally conscious in our valley, how come this stuff's getting increased?
Can I explain what we do around waterways? And I will acknowledge and admit right now that we made a mistake with baiting one of your creeks. So well, we probably did, but all I was alluded to was one of them, and there's probably others.
This one, all these streams are all like...
Okay, we
So
can
can
move on.
I just...
Anyway, he went on just to say, yeah, we've made a mistake. Our pilot didn't realise there was a water source there. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of locals at that meeting who were really unhappy. And we also know that there was another meeting. This is the one that Katarzyna was talking about at Currumbin, where you had Dr. Puckett, Marnie Manning, who's suddenly the new head of operations. So Graham Dudgeon's nowhere to be seen anymore. And this guy here, this other guy here, he is Rhys Pianta. He's the advocacy manager for the Invasive Species Council that lobbies for more and more money for this program. He also, so the residents of Sanford, we went to our local MP, Nikki Boyd, and Nikki Boyd's the Labour MP for Pine Rivers, and she said, I can't help you, Sanford, because I have a conflict of interest. That's her husband. So, and then Nikki Boyd, who is currently going up for the state election, said, "This fire ant program's nothing to do with me. Those fire ants are now in New South Wales. You need to go to Peter Dutton, who's our federal member." So she's totally passing the buck on this, which Sanford residents are not happy about. Marnie Manning at this meeting at Currumbin actually admits we've lost Sanford. They've lost Sanford, and she...
And I think this is where we need to be more communicative and tell you exactly what we take into account. We do look at, we assess every time we're about to treat, we look at human rights and make sure that we understand that we are infringing on people's human rights, and we make sure that we believe we're as limited as possible as we can be, and be respectful entering on people's properties. And that's why
Look at him in the middle. He's looking very uncomfortable. Okay, we can move on. She basically says we realise we are infringing on your human rights. And she also says we've lost Sanford, and obviously Dr. Puckett's very uncomfortable during that. Now, Dr. Washington Sanchez is the guy who did our water test for us. He's an independent chemical analyst. He lives locally, and he was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately, due to circumstances, he hasn't been able to make it. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what Dr. Washington told us. So the results came back a couple of weeks after, and it was pretty shocking. So in the middle here is Dawson Creek. The levels of pyriproxyfen were 81 micrograms per litre, and the upper reporting limit is 0.04. That is 202,000% more than the safe limit.
South Pine River also came back at 3.3, which is still extremely high, but as I said, it had been raining that afternoon, so it had diluted quite a lot of that water sample. Dr. Washington actually had those results done at Queensland Government Forensic and Scientific Service Lab. He didn't tell them that he was doing it for this because, interestingly, since we've had our results, which were positive, no one has had a positive result since. So Dr. Washington wrote us this report, and he said the detected levels of pyriproxine in Dawson Creek at 81 micrograms is alarmingly high, significantly exceeding safe environmental concentrations. This could lead to severe ecological consequences such as reduced fish populations, impaired ecosystem health. We have lungfish in our rivers there, and lungfish are a vulnerable species. They've actually said we won't know those lungfish are gone until they're gone, and nobody seems to be monitoring them at all at the moment. Now, our residents in Sanford Valley, we're pretty switched on, and we don't like stuff happening like this. So we had a resident who recorded the flight tracker map of one of those choppers. Now, what you can see here is the majority of the squiggles, that's over our national park. That's Mount Glorious, the top one, and that's Mount Nebo, the bottom one. They're all heavily canopied areas, and as you heard, those ants do not nest in the forest. So why are they dropping it all over Mount Glorious? And these have all waterways that are running down into our valley. So that's pretty shocking. Did you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, look, we just wanted to take that point, and that's what happened in Sanford Valley. So you go, well, what does our terrain look like? And we know what our terrain looks like. And we're really heavy. Here's Currumbin Valley here. So we're substantially forested, we know that. And we also have these really steep escarpments which drop straight into Currumbin Creek. So any wash-off is going to go into Currumbin Creek, and we've all been concerned about Currumbin Creek for years in terms of what goes in there upstream and comes down. And the interesting, we keep coming back to this. They keep telling us, they know this. The fire ants don't live in the forest. So why are you doing that? And secondly, most incursions come from human movement of materials. In the early days back in December, and I'm talking to these guys and I'm saying, a fire ant's here, and they go, yeah. Oh, where are they? And they say, well, they're at the Pony Club on Galleon Way and the other one up at Coplix. I thought, okay, well, what did they walk here? And they said, no, they came in the hay. Yeah, they came in the hay. They were transported here. So we've got two things going on here. The ants aren't walking here; they've been transported here, and they're not in the forest. So how does carpet bombing the entire countryside? Is that a disproportionate response to the risk we're facing?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just do a very, very quick history of the fire ants in Australia, because a lot of people think they've only been here since 2001, but in fact they were only discovered in 2001, but because the nests were about 1/2 metre high and covering almost 40,000 hectares, it shows that they've been here since the 1990s, so probably at least 10 years prior to that. So between 2001 and 2004, they did a number of poisoning programs and 2 years of surveillance, and eradication was finally abandoned and converted to what is more reasonable, which is containment and suppression. But for some reason, they kept bringing back multiple programs that have started and been abandoned since then. And since 2017, they've just been non-stop, just saying they're eradicating, but I'll talk a bit more about why they're calling it eradication. So the first brochure I got actually said Australia is the only country to attempt an ant eradication on this scale. Every state and territory backs our program. Now the reason for this is the largest ever successful eradication was on 8,300 hectares. We're talking 850,000 hectares. That's over 2,000 acres of land. Other countries such as China, USA, Taiwan, they've all given up, and we're the only country stupid enough to keep trying to eradicate, but again, I'll tell you why in just a minute. So Henry Palaszczuk, yeah, Henry Palaszczuk was one of the first. He was the Minister of Agriculture back in 2004, and he has consistently talked about this program. And he was asked, "Are we winning at the war against the fire ants?" And he didn't actually say yes. He just actually said, "My simple answer is this: we can find fire ants and we can kill fire ants." But that isn't a yes, is it? And that was back in 2004. But he also goes on to say, if you go to the next one, they actually knew back then that there was a lot of land that was no interest to fire ant control because they were heavily forested areas. So again, we're asking, why are they carpet bombing 2 million acres now of land? Another lady that has been very outspoken about this program is Dr. Pam Swepson. She actually just won Whistleblower of the Year award for her revelations about this program. She actually made a public interest disclosure back in, I think, 2006, after she had worked for the program for a couple of years. And she actually said, and she's now recently said, in 20 years, we have spent $1 billion and the problem is 20 times worse. So you can, so she's spoken out about this program. Now, the reason we're talking about it is because of the funding. So the funding of the program has, at the moment, something like over $500 million allocated for it to run until 2027. They've already spent $1 billion, and they need this program to run till 2032 because guess what? They want to eradicate these ants in time for the Olympics.
Sarah, do you just want to mention federal funding from an eradication?
Yeah, and the other reason they're motivated to call it eradication is because 90% of that funding comes from the federal and other states. And Queensland only pays 10% of that funding, so $1.5 billion now, and Queensland has paid 10% of that, and they get to run the program and get paid to run the program. So there's a big incentive to call it eradication. So even with the current funding, you can put it on. Even with the current funding structure, they've been allocated $113 million a year. But even after a strategic review they did back in 2021, so they need at least 200 to 300 million a year to run this program to eliminate them by 2032. So they're not even got half of what they really need if they were supposedly doing it properly. But and the biggest concern, so one thing Sanford people said, what is this doing to our environment? Where is the environmental risk assessment? And they said, oh, we've got this one here. We did it in 2001. We looked at 60 plots of land that were 532 square metres on average, and all the native ants repopulated except one, but we're happy that it's not harming the environment. So that's their environmental risk assessment, a study done in 2001 looking at 532 square metre blocks of land, whereas we're talking 850,000 hectares of blanketing of these poisons. And the USA, Dr. Puckett, who you saw earlier picking his ear, he said, our largest mistake was the use of insecticide dropped aerially. What we were disturbing were the would-be competitors of fire ants. So when the fire ants moved in, they had no competitors. Now that is our biggest concern now, is these baits, these poisons, they poison all our ants. They don't just poison fire ants. And so we are just going to kill all the native ants, and they are the ones who are the competitors. So we will end up with an even worse problem after this. And that was part of that same study I think I've just talked to you about. We've got some, they've been breaching their permits left, right and centre since this started. I won't talk too much about it because I think Connie, who's coming on, is going to talk about that. But yeah, again, these are all the permits that I put up for discussion, but Connie's going to be talking about the permit. I just want to talk about this one, though. This is the permit for S-methoprene that they say is the other chemical that's a bit better than pyriproxyfen, even though it's still not. It's still very toxic to aquatic life. I just want to point out the permit holder is Biosecurity Queensland. The supplier of this chemical is also Biosecurity Queensland. So they're supplying the chemical. And there's another supplier called Wellmark International Australia Proprietary Limited. And I thought that sounds pretty impressive. So I looked up their address on Google Maps, and it's this little shack in the middle of nowhere. A little meth shed. So this is Wellmark International. Anyway, we'll just go. I won't talk about the permits too much. So the only thing the program has done to Sanford is they did call off the choppers. We no longer had aerial baiting, and then they actually said we're going to review our procedures. Meanwhile, they were still bombing everyone else. We're going to review our procedures, and in future we will only use S-methoprene in Sanford Valley, but it's still very toxic to aquatic life, and it indicates do not contaminate waterways. Connie's going to talk about the chemicals, so I won't talk about that. Again, chemicals. There's lots of studies how dangerous these chemicals are, so Connie will talk about that. These are the concerns with the program today. No environmental impact studies, breaches of permits. They don't even seem to be adhering to the CASA permits for their aircraft. Obviously, water contamination. One of the big things for us, though, is the mental health it's causing to people. People are really stressed about this, and we're feeling very violated. We're feeling violated because now these people are not only with the aircraft, which you can't seem to stop, but they're coming onto our land, they're jumping fences, they're bringing police, they're threatening us with $15,000 fines. And so this is why we're having these meetings. We need people to be aware about what's going on, and hopefully we can all band together and help each other. And I just want to point out this map here, on the colourful map on this side is a map of the treatment area they've done, where this is all the poisoning they've put down between 2017 and 2021. Some areas they've done 11 times. And then I want to point out the current map of infestations, and that's the same area. And as you can see, those ants are still there, so aerial baiting does not appear to be working that well. We've been consulting with a number of other scientists. We've had Dr. Matt Landos, who's Director of Future Fisheries. He's helped us a lot. He's also spoken in the press about how the poisons are being used. He goes through a number of key points. One, that they found fipronil in the Logan River, which is a forever chemical and a class 1 carcinogen. That's what they use to treat the nests directly with. I won't go through all those because there's a lot of speakers to come after me. And then that brings us on to Dr. Connie Turney, who has been amazing. She's been helping us and talks with us, and she's going to talk now about her experience.
What about Peter Dutton? You said, did you have a meeting with Peter Dutton?
Yeah, I had a meeting with Peter Dutton yesterday, and he's given us some good pointers, and I'll be sharing that on the Facebook group. But basically, we're going to be talking to the Commissioner of Police about what the police are doing with this program. He seems to be on our way of thinking that this program isn't effective, but because he's not currently in power, we need to wait until the next sort of state elections, where we think there will be a shift to LNP. So we can start talking then about getting an inquiry. Yeah.
Sarah, before we go to Connie, I'm interested, you ended up in a dialogue with the Minister for Agriculture, Mark Ferner, right? How did that conversation
How could I forget that one? Yeah, I met with Mark Ferner at one of his meetings, because he's actually the Minister of the suburb down from Sanford, of Ferny Grove. He was just telling us the usual spiel, like, the program's amazing, it's working. And when we started asking him about, well, what about this, what about that, what about poisoning our creek, he promised me a meeting with him in the city. He said, look, come along, we'll meet with you in the city. I'll bring along DAF and biosecurity. Anyway, then shortly after that, I did a series of radio interviews. And every time I did a radio interview, Mark Ferner would come on after me and start gradually saying, first of all, he said, oh, we're trying to meet with these people and they're refusing to meet with us. But the people who were trying to organise it, they were dragging their heels meeting us. But he's telling everyone on the radio, oh, these people aren't meeting with us. Then his dialogue got like more and more insulting. He said on one radio show, he said, you do realise these people you're dealing with are anti-vaxxers, like, and conspiracy theorists. And then it got actually even worse, because I spoke at a rally, and next minute I'm being interviewed by an ABC reporter, and he's asking me over and over again, what's your thoughts on microcephaly? What's your thoughts? I've never talked about microcephaly in any of these speeches I've done. And next minute, an ABC's done a total hit piece on me, saying anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist from Sanford Valley is saying that fire ant baits causes babies' brains to be small. And I never said that. Also, Connie Turney talked at that same rally with me. They didn't even mention in the article that she was there with me. So it was a total hit piece to make us look as if, yeah, we're a bunch of nutters. But anyway, Mark Ferner has since now refused a meeting with me. He doesn't want to see me anymore, so that one's over and done with.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully.
No, I don't think that should be left that way. So, Mark Ferner, if you're going to watch this video afterwards, we're interested in your response to Sarah, because that's just outright rude. You are the government, you're there to serve us. We have some validated concerns here. Where are you? What's going on?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I have problems. I can't share.
Oh,
I can't share because you blocked the sharing.
okay. Now, hang on a sec. I'm not going to deal with the technical issue, so leave that with me. A second. All right, hang on, Connie. So what do you know what I have to do on my end to share?
I have no idea. I've never had that. Hang on.
Apparently you have to be the host in order for you to share your screen.
Oh, okay.
If you click share, you'll have an option for multiple participants can share.
Got it. Alright. Try now.
Voila. Voila. Yeah, that's my share now. Okay.
Yeah, we're good to go. Thank you, Connie. Over
Good
to
to
you.
go?
Yep.
Okay. Right. Hang on. Put it on.
Connie, you might introduce yourself. You can do that.
Yes. Yes, I will do that. So I'm Dr. Connie Turney. I work at a university at the Queensland University, but I'm not speaking for them. I was told I'm not allowed to say that. I was sprayed in 2022, and ever since I have been fighting this. I was sprayed because without knowledge that they were spraying me. I have complained about the permits, and I will go through that in the talk. So basically, these baits, as already mentioned, are soaked in soybean oil mixed with broad spectrum, and I have to emphasize here the broad spectrum course regulator, either it's esmethocrim or pyriproxyfen. Now, broad spectrum means that it is not specific for fire ants, but for all arthropods. Now, arthropods is a huge group of animals. There's 80% of the world animals are arthropods. So the claim is that other animals do not eat. Their claim from the fire ant department is that other animals do not eat the baits. However, there's actually a study out there. They looked at 5 native ant species and found that they also pick up their bait. And what they also said, this was a study by Webb, and he looked at pyroproxyphon ants, which is a distance which the fire ant department uses, and he looked at these 5 ant species, native ant species, also obviously at fire ants. But in his paper, he said, over the past 10 years, various modifications to the standard corn and oil formulation and distance have been investigated to improve attractiveness for a wider range of ant species than just in the original key target species, the red important fire ant. So we already know that it affects other ant species. So they looked at, basically meat ant, green ants, black ants. I don't know all these ant species. I'm not an entomologist. So the hypothesis out there by scientists is that by also killing native ants, mass pesticide application reduces competitive burden, thereby enabling fire ants to invade more quickly than they would in the absence of this management. The newly fire ant mated queens selects open, human-altered ecosystem for founding new colonies, and that is because she doesn't have a stinger. She's very open to having predators actually attack her. So they go into areas that are altered, where other ants normally don't like to be. By landing in disturbed habitat, which visits its reduced native ant population, newly mated fire ant queens increase their chances of successful colony establishment. So by actually killing the native ants, we're helping the fire ant to establish. And I unfortunately didn't see the slides, but basically what Sarah already said, in 2001 they detected a nest, and according to their own data, the government's data, they estimated that this has been there for 20 years. So for 20 years, we haven't even known that they're there, and then found one nest. Then they went into this wonderful eradication program for 23 years, and found we have now over 15,000 fire ant nests in 600,000 hectares. And they have extended this to, because they want to come in and do this eradication. So there was a study done in 2017 overseas in America by Melissa Brown for her master's, and she reported on the situation in America. And she said the eradication of the fire ant has been unsuccessful. On the contrary, the overuse of insecticides has exacerbated the fire ant problem. Sarah shared with me this wonderful letter from Professor Joshua King from the University of Central Florida, and he's an entomologist. And I want to just go through some points here. So he said he's very, very concerned about the toxic prophylactic baiting because that is conducted here. It ignores, as Sarah also already said, it ignores where the fire ants are most likely to occur. Distribution of fire ants across a landscape is very predictable, and ignoring what is known about the dispersal pattern and behavior increases the risk for non-target species to be impacted. So there has been no eradication program has ever succeeded in preventing fire ant establishment and spread over large areas and longer time spans. This is not anecdotal, but has unfortunately been repeatedly demonstrated. And he's also concerned about the widespread prophylactic use of toxic broadcast baits as they may impact non-target ants.
And the reduction of the native ant community hastens, not slowing the invasion of fire ants. And like I said, we have seen this already. And there's also the more, if you spread on areas where the fire ant's not even there, there's potential for other non-target species impact on aquatic and terrestrial arthropods and wildlife. That impact is not trivial, he said. So coming back to, let's go back to 2001. In 2001, the minister got a report from the Threatened Species Scientific Committee. And what the fire ant program keeps on telling, oh, it's all terrible, our biodiversity will be affected. So what this comes from, this, that our biodiversity will be affected, was from a study, from the only study from NatTrust and Wonder Road. They reported on the impact on biodiversity. Now the Threatened Species Scientific Committee looked at this, and it was a Mickey Mouse study, read it. So no national listed threatened species were investigated by the Brisbane study. Due to the paucity of biodiversity research currently developed, it is not possible to determine if the current investigation is adversely affecting any listed threatened species. So they sent this to the minister. So there is currently no study available which evaluates the effects of fire ants on listed species or ecological communities. They sent that to the minister in 2001. Well, he obviously didn't listen and just went. That is their evidence that they can spray and we need to get rid of them so urgently. Coming back to what's in the fire ant in the baits. When we, I work in respiratory bacteria and I do a lot of research in chicken and pigs. And the normal chicken diet consists of corn and soybean oil. It's in there. So the question is, why would wild poultry not eat this or any other birds? I mean, it's nice food. There was a study done that looked at if birds or like chicken eat this. They found that some of it was excreted, but some of it also was in the tissue and some of it was in the eggs. When cattle eat this, and I mean, we're spraying this everywhere. It's on the grass, it's everywhere where cattle are. When cattle eat as mesobrain, it's contained in the tissue as well, and it is in the milk. So there's also a couple of other moves that question the safety of this program. This is from their own website, not, I shifted the picture, that's all I did. So what does this mean for organic and biodynamic? I should probably say first, when they first wanted to spray my place again, they told me that it was safe for organic. They didn't say there was a withholding period, they said it was safe for organic. Now, on their website themselves, they say, we have worked with the Commonwealth staff to reduce production impacts for organic operators in our fire ant treatment areas. So the waiting period now for re-entry for organic and biodynamic products treated using products containing an insect growth regulator is now 3 weeks. It was previously 12 months. So I have actually written to them and said, where is the risk assessment? How can you go from 12 months to 3 weeks? They won't show me a risk assessment. They said apparently there was a study done by DEF that looked at the residue. I tried DEF to get that, but I need to have apparently what's it called, a right to information request to get that. The APVM also changed their permit. So the APVM is the one authority, the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicine Authority that gives these permits. So as mesoprene was previously, it said in there, do not apply if fire ant population are not evident and no longer evident. So when I was sprayed in 22, I basically told them you can't spray on my place because there's no fire ants. And I complained to APVMA. What happened there was that after 2 years, they gave this complaint, which they can handle themselves according to their website. They gave this complaint to DEF. And DEF said, oh, there's nothing to see here. No, it's all safe. And that was it. So I didn't get anywhere with this complaint. But they changed their permit. So now it says, do not apply where threatened invertebrate species and or threatened ecological communities are present, except in a fire ant eradication zone. So it doesn't matter whether you have threatened or invertebrate species or ecological communities. There we can destroy them, but we don't do that outside. Then they come to this claim that it degrades relatively quickly. In the permit, it used to say that you had to lock your chicken away for 2 days or 48 hours. Well, there was a study done, I found it, and it looked at pyriproxyfen and S-methoprene. And it basically, they looked at it because they thought, well, encapsulation should hold the bait a little bit longer, the active ingredients, and they wanted to look at UV exposure. And this is for pyriproxyfen. This is a graph for pyriproxyfen. So they only looked for 8.5 days. Don't know how they picked that, but 8.5 days. And it turns out that pyriproxyfen was more stable with relatively little decline. I mean, when you look at them undercover, there's this, which is a black line, there's no decline at all. When you look at the other two, which is full sun and 50% cover, you have 10 to 20% from exposed and semi-exposed areas, 20% loss of the active ingredient. So it's very, very, very stable. S-mesoprim is a little bit better in the sense that it actually degrades a little bit. So they looked at Engage and they found that, mind you, undercover, again, it's not degrading at all. This is a solid black line. But after 2.5 days, it starts to degrade and goes rapidly down, and it goes down to 91% for full sun and 75% for 50% cover.
Connie, can I just ask a question there? In effect, what you're saying is if they drop that all through our forests and it ends up on the forest floor, which is a shaded area, you're saying it just persists there. It doesn't break down.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know for how long, because they only did this for 8.5 days. So, okay, well, that sounds okay in a sense. Okay, it will eventually degrade, but when pyriproxyfen degrades, it degrades into 6 metabolites, and most of them persist for more than 30 days in the soil. Now, in this study I was reading, and I have the paper if anybody wants to have a look at that. They call the metabolites A to D. Metabolites C and E and F cause toxicity to soil enzymes. Now, it's not only affecting our animals, it's affecting our soil. There was another study that showed that these degraded products actually affect our earthworms. So it affects the soil and whatever lives in it. So toxicity of the metabolites was far greater than the parent pyriproxyfen. So and then another study looked at this again and said metabolite A, B, C, E, and F are suggested to be very toxic, whereas metabolite D has been counted under the extremely toxic category. So we're thinking that it's only the pyriproxyfen, the whole product, but there's the metabolites, and there's not much out there what they actually do. I mean, we have an extremely toxic chemical, and it's in our environment for 30 days. So what does that do to the environment? What does that do to animals that walk over it? There's no studies out there. The degraded compounds of S-mesoprene, such as, I won't name them all because they're very long names, and I'll probably stumble over them. They affected the development of frog embryos, while S-mesoprene itself did not. So what that says is that the metabolites that actually come from them are actually worse than the whole product. So, and no one ever did any studies. I mean, this is a couple of studies I've found, but nobody ever did any studies. What happened to that in the environment? And they might look at pyriproxyfen itself or S-mesoprene itself, but what about these products that are actually more effective than the whole product in itself? So yes, that is actually a very big concern, something that is extremely toxic in our environment. Now coming back to this zone, so they extended the zone and they're going to go inwards, and basically that's their plan. But we have already found fire ants outside this. There was one found in Oki, which is northwest of Currumbin. So we're already out of the end area. I don't know why they're even doing this. And the problem throughout these years is that they're actually not controlling the movement of soil. The movement of soil, of mulch, of compost, of hay, because fire ant queens love this apparently. And they travel with the soil and the mulch so they travel with that. And they haven't controlled that. So even if they spray everything, if they're not controlling the movement of soil, they can spray them and the fire ant will reinvade. And they are more successful than any, because they haven't got any other ant species anymore. So they will be very successful, and we have seen this. So why are we so concerned about ants? So if you just look at the ants, there's 1,275 described Australian ant species, and they are essential for the ecosystem health. They help with the soil aeration and turnover. They aid in seed dispersal. Some of the seeds of the native trees actually need to have holes in their outer shell, so that they can basically grow. They consume organic material and provide food for other organisms. Ants control pest population by preying on eggs and larvae. So their presence ensures a balanced flow of energy in the ecosystem. So if you have no ants, your ecosystem is already damaged. So you don't even have to damage all the other species or us, that you just by getting rid of the ants. There was a study done spraying S-mesoprene on wetlands. Now, this is probably spraying, but it shows how bad the effect of it is. So they sprayed 0.05 to 0.058 kilo active ingredients per hectare. So this is a difference, active ingredients, not just the kilograms. We sprayed 0.008 to 0.1 kilogram per active ingredient per hectare, so it's not that much different. So they sprayed over 3 years, 6 times during the spring and summer, at 3 weeks interval, and they reduced the insect density in this area by 57 to 83% in 3 years, amounting to a biomass reduction of 50 to 83% during this test period. So they're doing an enormous amount of damage. So another study was concerned about S-mesoprene and its derivatives, because it might be able to affect vertebrate gene transcription there's evidence that the compounds can bind to retinoid X receptor. This would have developmental effects on amphibians. So we're talking here frogs and frogs, for example, as retinoids act as ligands during vertebrate development. So what that means is they're actively helping to develop limb formation, for example. So there have been studies noticed that the frogs don't have proper limbs. When they sprayed at my place, I had lots of green frogs. We only moved to this place before they were spraying, shortly before they were spraying. And we had heaps of green frogs on the shed. They came in the night and were all sitting around the lights. After spraying, we had not a single green fox anymore. So, unfortunately, we never collected the dead frogs. My husband's seen them, but we haven't collected them because we didn't make, again, this connection. And we didn't know what they were spraying. It was kind of a long journey. So in summary, this program is most likely to increase the fire ant populations. It will have detrimental effect on other species. On ant species, it's most likely to have a detrimental effect on other species, arthropods, and higher order species, including birds. As this toxin is stored in the tissue and released in milk, it will affect grass-eating animals, and if they're cows, it will in its ends affect us as well. If it is found in the tissue, then it's most likely bioaccumulative, which would mean over the constant spraying for the 2 years, the level will most likely be much higher than the so-called safe levels. The effect of growth regulators are not instant, and we will not see the effects instantly, which means most likely that we won't even notice it till it's way too late. Spraying baits into an area where there are no fire ants will only increase the risk for non-target species. Fire ant program websites tells us that they will do monitoring after the 2 years when they spray, so that this new program is supposed to be for 10 years. 2 years they will be spraying, and then they will, via helicopter and ground crew, monitor the area. So if they can, this sounds very strange, but apparently they can find it by helicopter. So if they can find nests by helicopter, the question is, why can we not just do a targeted approach and destroy the nest found during a survey? Why do we have to spray everything? And there's definitely better ways to control fire ants, ways that do not endanger other species and do not harm the environment, and which will make sure that our health is not affected. Yeah, that's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connie. That was amazing. And scary all at the same time. Now, Connie, you're just going to hang in there and listen on. You have to do that. All right. What we'll do is, and I might get you to go on mute. But a huge thank you from here, Connie. I don't know if you could see that.
Wanting for South.
Well, let's just play that.
Wanting for South East pet owners tonight, there are growing concerns that dogs are being poisoned by a common substance. Experts now warning of the potential risks of fire ant bait.
Enjoying plenty of attention and much needed scratches, 12-year-old Axel is back at home and on the mend.
We weren't sure whether he was going to make it.
Owner Paolo was walking Axel down to the local park in Currumbin waters, and when they got home, things took a turn for the worst.
He has had a lick in his feet, and when we've gotten home, we put him down, and later on that night, he started throwing up and wouldn't stop throwing up.
Paolo rushing the Maltese Shih Tzu to the vet.
And then they'd done blood tests and told us that it was toxic. His liver had been totally poisoned by toxins.
Veterinarian Michael O'Donoghue claiming the poison likely came from recent fire ant bait in the area.
There's the strong association there between the fire ant bait and the clinical signs that we see.
Paolo's quick thinking saving Axel's life.
It is one of our pets, and we pretty much do anything for them.
The National Fire Ant Eradication Program says treatment is non-toxic to pets. The active ingredients are commonly used in veterinary practices like pest control and flea collars. But experts say too much of these ingredients can be detrimental.
But yeah, toxins certainly do kill animals on a regular basis.
Dr. Michael now urging locals to stay vigilant.
Well, obviously keep them off the grass if you know that fire ant bait has been applied on your property or outside your footpath, so keep them off the grass.
But mostly nowadays I think I'll take them down into the sand of the beach where I know nothing's been treated.
Bella Schwarzenegger, 9 News.
All right. Paolo, are you here tonight? Yeah? Oh, okay. Good. Well, Paolo's actually here. And so is Dr. Michael O'Donoghue. And Michael, if you could make your way down here. So we've been chatting with Michael for a while, and you know, it's interesting, different measures of things. You think about how you measure things. Well, what better way to measure? I'll get you to just pop that on. Anyway, up there. Okay, if there's an injured pet or livestock, or where does it go? Well, it comes to our local veterinary practice. So, Michael, what's been your experience?
Yes, certainly we started to see quite a few sick animals coming into Currumbin Fair Vet. They all were consistently started to be lethargic, then they were vomiting, so they came down to us, and we certainly did some blood tests, and they all consistently showed elevated liver enzymes, well above the normal levels of liver enzymes. So there's consistency of signs there. And yeah, unfortunately, some animals like Axel did make a recovery, which was good, but other animals might have taken the bait in much larger amounts, especially, unfortunately, Labradors, which like to eat a lot. And these, unfortunately, Olivia was found dead one morning, not long after bait was passed. Billy was also a dog that died not long after baiting. And pathology showed extensive liver damage, and there was no sign of cancer or anything like that, but these dogs were healthy dogs that suddenly died not long after they were baited. So they say, yeah, this was, we've been using Vipronol or these for flea treatments for a long time. Yes, but that was like we carefully put a little drops on the back of dogs' backs to treat fleas. Certainly, and these are still toxic chemicals, and some animals still react to these poisons. You know, you have to be careful. There are poisons, and animals will react to poisons, so you can't say they're always safe. And so all chemicals have to be used with precautions, and some animals react to flea toxins, and you have to look at alternates or use a different product. So to say it's completely safe is bunkum. You know, all these chemicals, should be used with precaution, and you shouldn't just be willy-nilly letting animals have access to it. So yeah, it's still a very hard thing to prove because the vet didn't give out this chemical. So you have to do the testing yourself. There's a chemical residual laboratory, and they've told us that you can actually test for these chemicals, but it's about $500 per chemical, and it's up to that person to fund that themselves, and that's a lot of money that may or may not prove effective. So yeah, it's certainly a great shame that our pets have been lost their lives, and it's still very hard to prove, but there seems to be accumulation of evidence. Like you can't say, well, this animal definitely did it, but there's a consistency of signs out there to say that not long after these baiting was applied, these animals suddenly became acutely sick, had liver toxins, vomited, and some of them recovered, but unfortunately also, and some animals have lost their lives.
Michael, for the avoidance of doubt, and there's always this thing around proving causal correlation, right? But anecdotal evidence is strong. For the avoidance of doubt, is there any doubt in your mind that the fire ant baiting program is causing problems here?
there seems to be a very strong level of evidence, a consistency of signs. See, there's so much, consistency there that, these animals were sick days after the application. But it's, it'd be so good to be able to test for those toxins. That's a better standard if we somehow could do the testing of a sick animal. And also, about the bait, you'd be able to collect the bait and prove that was what was being applied was the poison that we found in the animals. So that's sort of a standard we need to look for if you have a sick animal, be willing to test for it, I think.
Okay. And I'm going to introduce Alison in a minute to talk a little bit to this as well, local resident. But we keep coming back to this thing. You want us to test for it? We have to test for this? Yes, so the question is, well, hang on. You're running the program. You put it together. You are promising us it's safe over and over and over. But when we see this sort of anecdotal evidence, which is really compelling and from a local vet, and I'm sure it's happening elsewhere, we have to test to prove this. There's something gone wrong. Now, Alison, you're a very staunch
Sorry.
advocate of different things.
Well, Hi everyone. Some of you I have probably spoken to on social media, so it's really good to see you all here tonight. Yes, I am emotional. You got this. I know. Sorry. I knew I did. Okay, for you of those who don't know me, I put myself out on social media earlier this year when my beautiful friend rang me and told me what was in the fire ant bait. And we started connecting with all of you people out here. And through that, I got to meet, can I just go back to the other side, Peter? Sorry. I got to meet these lovely owners online. Nessie's mum, I think might be here. Olivia, vomiting, and he has been to see, I think he's seen Dr. Carl along with you. So now he's on a nebulizer to try and get his lung function back and his liver enzymes. He's still struggling, but he's still with us. So we've had paralysed chickens who now they're okay, but their eggs are not viable. And guinea fowl chickens are dead. These two beautiful cats, Mishka and Lucifer, were brother and sister. I don't really want to go into too much of what happened to them because it just disturbs me too much. They suffered incredibly after their place was baited and their parents were told it's safe and effective. She doesn't have fire ants. She too lives in canopy areas. But even if you don't live in canopy areas, I don't. I live in a suburban block. I don't have fire ants. So it's just a little difficult to understand why they keep doing what they're doing. But I'll just invite over, this is just impromptu, sorry. This is Kashazina's daughter, Ava, and she is going to speak about her pets, which is Willow and the snake eggs.
Hi. So I breed snakes. I've been breeding snakes for 4 years. And these are what you call slugs. So slugs are infertile eggs. So something has happened in the snake's reproductive system that's caused it to produce 0 fertile eggs. There was 2 okay eggs in this batch of eggs, and they had horrible veins, which means they're unlikely to survive. And this female has produced for me 3 years in a row beautiful pearly white eggs. And this is the first year where she's produced all slugs. And look, it takes so much effort from the female to create these eggs just to produce all duds. And you can't prove it, but it's kind of weird that a perfectly healthy female that creates perfectly healthy eggs and perfectly healthy hatchlings creates an entire clutch of infertile eggs. And this is my cat, Willow. She's 9 years old and has had 0 health issues. And as soon as the fire ant baiting happens, she gets a pyometra, which is an infection of the uterus. And she had to get pretty much emergency surgery. She had to get blood tests and urine tests because she was deteriorating. And look, she's a perfectly healthy cat. We spend so much time caring for her, and my snakes are perfectly healthy. They've produced beautiful clutches before, and as soon as this poison goes onto our properties, I get infertile eggs and a cat with an infected uterus. So something's up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ava. Thanks, Ava. With all these animals, oh, here we go. Sorry, I forgot. There's just too many. Flicker was a pregnant mare, and her pal, Honey Bear, had their property land baited because their property is too small to be aerial, thank God, but not thank God. They heavily baited their area. They were at a show the next day. It rained heavily, and the next morning when they got home, Flicker was dead. She was dead in the paddock, and then and her foal passed away as well. So that was pretty devastating. And there's so many that I could have put up here tonight, but it's endless. Trevor, who is actually here tonight, will be speaking as well. These are his 2 calves that ended up having to be put down at 6 weeks with toxicity to their livers. And he has never ever had any problems with his breeding program before this in 10 years. So, as Michael said, there definitely is a correlation between fire ant bait and our animals coming into contact with it. Now you might say, oh, but my dog's okay, or my cat's okay, or whatever. Great. We don't want to see any animals harmed. So those of them that aren't okay, that have lost their lives, that are still sick, and that we're caring for them, I ask you to please either write a stat deck and have it emailed to us, or, and again, what is most important, what Peter brought up with Kasarina and I today, is we need to report this to the governing bodies, because they're now saying, we haven't heard anything that's wrong.
That's rubbish, we've all written.
Absolutely, and I know that. I know for a fact. I don't have a photo of this particular horse that was injured. That case is actually sitting on Ashley Bason's desk. She has an email to say that that is on the desk of the head of the program, being cared for. Trevor's, his case is in there. I know several others that are too.
Yeah, I've reported cases to the AVPMA, and
I was just, sorry, you got me, and you can speak about that too.
Yeah, I reported the case, and they acknowledged that I sent in the report, so I've definitely sent in the reports. It's been reported.
Exactly, but they're telling us no, it hasn't, and that only came out in like a week ago. And I thank you, Michael, for standing up and putting yourself out there and making that report, because there's many vets that are seeing this and aren't putting it out because it's their livelihood, and I get that. So thank you very much for doing that. So for any of you, it doesn't matter whether it's your cat, your dog, whatever, even if it's intimidation by these people, which clearly happens, please report it, because they're saying no one's reporting it. So,
the DFAT.
Sorry, what was that?
To where? Yeah,
that is something that we need to, we haven't got...
We can report to the AVPMA, has a reporting website.
And we can
send a link for you.
Yes, we'll get that link and we'll put it up so we can have that reporting link for all of you. And even the intimidation one, I do have that link because it was sent to me because I told them that I was intimidated on my front fence and told I was going to have my place poisoned. So, yes, darling? Yes. No. Go ahead.
Okay. So the mayor's a liar. Oh, hi. Thank you.
What I wanted to ask was, when we're reporting these things, when we're reporting these things, we're basically reporting it to the people that are running the program.
Yeah.
Yes. So is there any way that we can change that?
There should be a separate.
There is. Look, there's a system. We're embroiled in a system, but a system works two ways. It gives us rights as well. What doesn't? If we don't report, then they continue to say we're not aware of any issues. So therefore we report. Then we put pressure on them to say, look at the reports. What are the outcomes of your findings? Show us your findings. And that's where we need to keep pushing the pressure back and demanding them to abide by their own system. Just simple as that.
Excuse me, could I just ask, I've been told that my property is going to be sprayed within the next 3 months. And I have no sign of any fire ants on the property. We have eggs in the incubator due to hatch on the 26th of this month. And I have 26 young chicks also. And I've told them that I have stock, or we have a stream going past, we have large forest all around us. I don't want these baits. And my response was to get a letter saying that they're doing these baitings in the area, and our property will be done within 3 months. We'll be given 48 hours notice. What can I do? What can I say? How can I stop them from coming and poisoning our free-range chickens?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We are going to get to that. Yeah. Michael, there's one question. Early on, when I'm talking to the program officers, and we say, well, what's the impact on a horse or a cow or a dog or whatever, and they will always say, oh, that cow would have to eat 2 kilograms of it, and the chances of them doing that is nil. But it seems to be, well, there is a risk. But what's not being considered here is what happens if you have a pregnant cow or fetuses in utero, which are really susceptible to really low doses of these sorts of chemicals. So there's a whole reproductive life cycle which is not encapsulated in that answer at all. It's just flipped over. And if Dr. Connie tells us that we're dropping the baits in forest, it's in a shaded area, it then persists in the environment for I don't know how long, and then you're looking at multiple life cycles of insects and mammals and what have you. You're at that critical point of the reproductive, and you don't need a lot of chemical. Am I on the right track there? Thinking.
Well, yeah, it's always a lot of chemicals can't be used on pregnant animals. There's you have to be really careful on any chemical you use on a dog or a cat. Read the information sheet, and so many of them say, do not use on pregnant animals. We don't know what's going to happen, or it's toxic to pregnant animals. So that should always be a consideration whenever you're putting a bait out, or a poison or a drug or anything like that, is to look, have they actually tested this on pregnant animals. So yeah, pregnant animals are always much more vulnerable. And I think Connie's point was also an important thing about the metabolites are often sometimes worse. They say, oh, we've tested this on an animal and have to eat a whole truckload to die. But what happens if the bait's left out for 3 days and then the animal eats it, or then the animals are exposed to it? Well, Connie was just explaining that it actually gets worse. So,
yeah. So the answers we're giving, these are simple questions. We're given a ridiculously simple answer there, which skips over a whole body of science, which they're not even looking at. All right. Thank you, Michael, Dr. Michael. Thank you, Alison.
I'd just like to say one thing that Michael can back up with this, because I actually sent him a message yesterday after my place was poisoned. I have a dog. I have a very small area for her to be able to relieve herself. So what do I do now that my place has been poisoned? What do I do with her? How do I keep her safe? So my full suggestion is, if you do have a dog, your place has been poisoned, when you try and minimise their time outside on the grass, when they come inside, wash their paws thoroughly. And I'm actually using apple cider vinegar on her paws as well, which is an antibacterial as well. So that's something you can do to try and keep yourself safe if your place is poisoned against your will. Thank you.
All right, awesome. All right, Simon. Where are you? Simon Mulvaney from Save the Bees Australia. Now, being a responsible MC here, how are we feeling? Because we're now an hour and 3/4 into it. Are we going well? We've got some speakers to go. Is this good information for you? Yeah, okay. Can I get everyone to stand up? Trust me, I'm in the wellness industry. And let's just have a bit of a breathe and a shake and a stretch. And as we move into the next chapter of this, trust me, this is good for you. And Simon, I'm doing this for you, so everyone's really awake. But you're part of the presentation. All right, let's take a seat. We're going to move on. We've got a few speakers to go. I think on current projections, we would be winding up around the 9 o'clock mark. How does that work for everyone? Is that going to be okay? Yeah, we're getting some good information here. All right. Simon Mulvaney from Save the Bees Australia. Now you've got quite the national program. You run a Facebook page with 65,000 followers. Is that?
That's the Instagram. We've got 100,000 on Facebook. But yeah.
All right. Here's a man on a mission, and he's flown all the way from
Melbourne, Victoria.
Victoria to talk to us tonight. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And I'm glad a lot of people, care about this issue. I obviously do. I'll just give you a bit of how I came to be involved in this issue. Was in the last couple of years, Australia has got a mite in New South Wales. It's called a varroa mite, and that affects honeybees. And we're meant to be, in the next decade, losing about 90% of honeybees. And if we lose our honeybees, obviously it's going to be really hard for our food production. I think all of us would have heard, if bees go, we go, within 4 years. When I campaigned quite hard in New South Wales because they were putting a chemical that they're using here, fipronil, out into the environment, trying to kill wild bees. It was found that the same poison is indiscriminate, so it kills all bees. So we campaigned hard to get that program stopped, and we ended up getting it stopped. But then later this year, earlier this year, I got invited to go to the Senate inquiry about fire ants and talk to them about how they're handling this issue. And then I was shocked when I, heard about the plan, which was, obviously poisoning a huge area. That's when I got in contact with Sarah, and we were able to coach her a little bit and get some of that amazing footage that was shared on the Save the Bees page, which ended up, I think, having over 1 million views, some of that information. Then I got on to the Invasive Species Council, and they're the people that I guess have constructed the program, or the government's, they're using as an excuse to run the program. I had a 2-hour conversation with Reece Pienta, and one of the other organisers answered the phone, and he said, we actually don't care about honeybees. We think honeybees are invasive, and we're actually happy that varroa mite's here. And so I said, well, that's going to affect your chances of growing food. But then I said, what about all the indigenous bees? And he said, indigenous bees. And I said, well, Australia's got over probably 2,000 varieties of indigenous bees, some yet to be discovered. And they have a particular relationship with the ecology, but they also nest under the ground. And so I said, have you done an environmental impact study or even a survey to what Indigenous bees are in these areas? And he said no. He actually said, Indigenous bees? What are they? Tell me more about them. And so it's quite rational or logically, you can see that these baits are going to end up on the ground and they're going to come in contact with, the native bees. We've also probably had a dozen people call after the fire ant people have been there, and their honeybees, that's probably one of the pictures of them, have completely died out. But the way these chemicals work, they're designed not to kill on contact, but they come back to the hive and eventually kill the queen bee. So it's sort of a slow death of the colony. Something that I don't know if anyone else has mentioned here, because we've been quite successful with our campaigning, but they keep on changing the goalposts in relation to what we're doing. And we can see that there's this misinformation bill coming up. One thing they've had a real problem with is me calling the ant bait poison. But it is an insecticide, it's got poison on the label, but they're saying it's a growth inhibitor, not a poison. And so I can just see the track this is going with this misinformation bill, where my page and our audience and group will be vulnerable to this bill coming in. So we've got to be careful about that as well. Thanks for all coming and caring, and I do think we're having a real effect in how they're running the campaign.
So, Simon, your specialty is bees.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit more about pollinators. Ants pollinators?
Ants are pollinators. The other thing, I think I'll just follow up, I think Connie said it as well. Every scientist I've spoken to this say our best weapon against the fire ants are the ants themselves. I got in trouble from the Invasive Species Council for one post that I did, and I took it from their own brochure of blue-banded bee nest and what they said was a fire ant nest. And on their brochure, they'd actually put funnel ant nests that are Indigenous on their own brochure. And they tried to call me out for using wrong picture. I said, I grabbed it from your brochure. So that's what we're dealing with. But every scientist I've spoken to, there's actually in America, the Silent Spring, a few people may have read that or heard about that. That was all revolving around fire ants too. Like after World War II, these chemical companies tried to find other enemies, and they found the enemy in the fire ant. But they, at that stage, were having contact poisons. So contact poisons mean everything dies. So they lost all their pollinators. And then the fire ants moved back in. And I can see, that's what, they're sort of manifesting with this program. They're going to kill all the, great native ants, and then, the fire ants have the potential to move in. It's a worry.
It's kind of lopsided, right? Because the environmental risk assessment we're asking for is different to the environmental risk assessment these programs think they're doing. They say, what's the harm to the environment if the ants get out of control? That's the only way they look at this. We say, well, hang on a sec, what's the risk to the environment if you carpet bomb the entire Currumbin Valley and you kill all our remaining pollinators beyond the European honeybee, our native bees and our ant pollinators, and we know they're going to kill them. Their own study, the McNaught study, said it killed the 12 native ant species that they tracked. They said, it killed them. They recolonised, but let's have no doubt, it kills all the ants. So we're really having a good go at killing all the pollinators in our environment here.
Yeah, absolutely. When they acknowledge as well that we're going to lose 90% of our honeybees and wild honeybees because of Varroa. And I don't think people realise what type of job the feral bees or the wild bees do. So we're going to lose them, and then, you won't. The other thing is that our native bees, like the blue-banded bee, they do a different type of pollination where they headbutt
Right, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but the economic cost of the fire ant program. Again, they will talk about the cost to the economy if the fire ants get out of control. But again, what's the cost to the economy if you're carpet bombing everything, killing the pollinators, disturbing our organic produce, and we can't sell it anymore? Well, no one's considering that.
Yeah, well, being the devil's advocate, because I went to the Senate inquiry, I got to hear their side of the story. And the argument is, because you're probably all wondering why are they going to all this trouble, but they say if the fire ants get near watering holes or dams, it stops the cattle from, drinking the water and they lose condition or something. So that's how they're, trying to pull this off. But then even their expert, you've seen Dr. Puckett from Texas, they brought out here. He ended up giving us more information on our side. But then people from Texas, when I posted him, said, he's in a lot of trouble in Texas because a lot of cattle farmers can't use their cattle on these farms anymore because too much bait's been applied. So a lot of the areas where they used to allow grazing animals can't be grazed now because of, the effects of the chemicals.
All right. Thank you, Simon.
That's all right. Thanks, Peter. Yep.
Great, well done. Now I'm going to introduce Trevor Holt, but I'm going to have a little aside here because Simon just talked about Texas, and Alison, I think this was you. One of us, Alison's not here, one of us, as a bit of a test, put a comment on a Texas Facebook page and said, hey, we got fire ants, they're a big problem here, they're invading our country here. What's your experience with fire ants over there? It was you, right, Alison, with the Facebook post in Texas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to
Sorry,
speak to that.
that was me.
And then Alison shared all the comments back from these are Texans, and they're saying, well, what do you mean? It's not really a problem. You guys should be worried, but over here you've got spiders, you've got snakes, you've got flying cockroaches. The flying cockroaches thing came up about 10 times. But what they weren't notably alarmed about was the fire ants. And it was really interesting in its absence. And, and I saw a couple of posts there and they're saying, look, you don't go outside and kick an ant's nest, a fire ant's nest. They're terrible. They'll swarm all over you and sting you and whatever. You go, great.
They'll come for your children.
Come for your children. And I go, well, I wouldn't go in my backyard and lie on a green ant's nest in the grass. So we're talking apples and apples here.
Yeah.
I just throw that as an aside. Obviously, we don't want the fire ants, but we're told they're baby killers. But I've got a big question mark on that now because other countries are living with them because they've had to. Look, I'm not going to stand here and say, we should accept fire ants here or what have you, but don't believe everything we're told. Yeah.
Like
Great.
500 comments on one, 500 comments on one post, and there was 2 people that mentioned fire ants. That was it. And those people were like, oh, well, if we're having a barbecue, we just go out and check our yard a couple of days beforehand, and then we just either use a chemical, if we choose to use a chemical, or boiling water. And they just remove them. And there is no one that is panicked or, peeved off that they've got fire ants. It's just a simple way of life. Like we have snakes, like Peter said, snakes, spiders, whatever, and green ants. It's just a way of life, but it's not as bad as what they make it out to be.
All right, thank you. Now, speaking of boiling water, I'm going to introduce you to Trevor Holt, who runs capital property up north. Trevor, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, g'day guys. Thanks for coming and for inviting me to talk, Sarah. That's great, and all the people in this campaign. Yeah, my name's Trevor Hold. I'm just a small acreage farmer in Adair in the Lockyer Valley. I have a small herd of cattle which I use for mental health. I've got a small mental health practice and counselling business, and have also got a couple of gypsy cobs and bred a few horse program as well. I've been exposed to this program since 2019. There was some fire ants nests located in my vicinity, I suppose, 8 kilometres from me at the university. Anyway, I didn't know anything about fire ants. I've lived in South East Queensland my whole life, didn't know anything about it. And I didn't know anything about their program, and I just trusted that they were doing the right thing, and I just went by my life and lived as I normally do. My biggest problem was initially there was a helicopter. I got 10 acres. It's literally 400 metres long by 100 metres wide, and there was a helicopter aerial baiting my property. I said, what's going on here? And you know, it's safe and effective or whatever, but I wasn't concerned about what was coming out of the helicopter. I was concerned that my mares were running through the barbed wire fences and injuring themselves, which they did. And I remember at the time I was very upset about it. No one gave me any notice, or no one gave me my animals any respect at all. And they said, you know, we're allowed to do this. This is what we can do. You know, can't do anything about it. So surely you can do something else. And they said, okay, we'll bring motorbikes. So then next time they come with motorbikes, quad bikes with spray bars at the back, and they were just as devastating for my animals. And at this stage, I still didn't know about the toxic. I didn't know anything about fire ants. I didn't even know what they were doing. I didn't question them. I just said, oh, whatever you got to do, you know. But I said, you can't have the motorbikes. They're just as bad, you know, with the stock than what the helicopter was. So they said, oh, okay, we'll do it by hand then. Then they rocked up with 20 guys, all in their high-vis fluoros with these hand mixers, and that was just, it didn't matter what they did, and that was my major gripe with them, was just the fact that they were disturbing my cattle, and they were just rocking up and disturbing my life, I suppose, and making things uncomfortable, and you know, more privacy issues, I suppose, is what we're generally worried about. Anyway, end of November last year, we lost our first calf. It was on the board there. There's a lot going on, and there's probably been a lot going on in everyone's lives lately with the COVID and everything, but a lot going on. And we actually had a gypsy cod that had cancer issues as well at the time, and we were putting him down, and when this happened, but at the time the vet looked at it and we confirmed it wasn't a snake bite, and we'd done all the tests on it and that, but we didn't have a freezer available. The freezers were full from animals, and we couldn't get the necropsy done that day, sort of thing, so it was late at night. But so we just buried him, and we didn't think much else of it. And then less than 6 months later, I had a calf born with deformities. Still didn't think much of it, just thought it was tight tendons, and we treated him for tight tendons, but had the same 6-week time frame, and we did send it away, and it was, you know, toxic liver poisoning. But I still didn't associate it with the program. I still didn't know. I didn't know anything about any of this. This is all new to me. But I emailed the team coordinator or whatever, said, oh, look, I've had 2 calves die now. Should we talk about whether there's anything wrong here? And they says, oh, there's nothing wrong, but you shouldn't post about this, but there's nothing wrong, and happy to talk to you if you want, because they never wanted to put anything in emails. They never wanted to put anything in writing. It was all in Word, and they wanted to talk to you about it. They didn't want to put anything down. And I said, I just want to, you know, put it in, you know, email, and then it was just crickets. They didn't get back to me. And the only time they got back to me was when I'd done a post, a controversial post, I suppose, but about Warrambilla can happen again, because I was seeing a lot of people were getting very emotionally upset by these people walking on their properties and bullying them, and as a mental health practitioner and you know, I'm an accredited counsellor, I was hearing lots of stories throughout the eradication zone of this occurring. And recent history in New South Wales with the EPA guy harassing that old farmer, he just shot him, you know. And that's a fact, you know, it's not controversial at all, that's what happened. And if you push people in the corner, bad things can happen. So I was raising severe concerns about that. Instead of addressing these concerns, Mark Ferner reported me to the authorities as a terrorist, and that's what I do. But anyway, they weren't listening, they weren't responding, and I was reporting to the APVMA, as everyone here says to do. And I said to them, so are you going to send me any of the results, you know, your findings back to me? And they says, oh, there's some circumstances that may arise where we won't be able to send you what we find. And I said, well, what circumstances are that? If the circumstances are negative towards us and there's a legal procedures could have it, we will not forward the results of them things back to you. So I learnt very early that there's no reporting to the APVMA is going to stop the program, because it's just collecting data. They're not going to do anything with that data, and they're not going to provide you any information if they find that they're culpable. They won't do it. And they've sent that in an email to me. I can show anyone here. It's a known fact. So I started doing other things, printing signs. I think Save the Bees had some art, and I just modified it a bit, and I thought, well, because they're telling me the same as what they're telling everyone else, or no one else has got any problems, there's no one else having any issues, so I put my name and my phone number and my email address on these signs. I've sold, you know, I've sold plenty of them along the eradication zone, and printed some pamphlets with, there's a Rubes at the back there, he done them for me, so and I distributed them, and I got to talking and finding a lot of people to talk to, and Sarah at Sanford Valley and that. But the main thing was I wanted them to stop because it's dangerous. We've talked about it, and the professionals have talked about it, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Repeated excessive exposure to these chemicals will cause harm. And you don't know what's going to happen unless you assess the situation. So in my circumstances, it was my cows that were exposed to excessive repeated exposure to these chemicals. And it's not just the chemicals that they dropped onto my land. One day I went through the dates, 13 mil of rain would have washed it into their drinking water. That's on my property. But my property had drought mitigation done because there was 4 years drought before that. We actually channeled it. So if there was any rain that landed on our property, it did wash to the dam. It was specifically designed to do that. But these guys never considered that. They never even asked about my farm management plan, and they never knew anything about it. But also too, my neighbour was a nursery, and he didn't like the baits, and he tried to fight them off. So they just helicoptered him as well, because it was compulsory for him to do it. And I didn't know about this, but then because he didn't want the chemicals, he was just hosing, because he had the power. He had a big nursery, whole 10 acres of nursery, and had all the pumps and everything set up. He could hose all his land off, and it just went into the waterways, which went into my dam, which fed my cattle. And I didn't know anything about it, but he didn't want to do it, and he didn't want to live with the chemicals, and he just hosed it off. So probably he's at fault there as well, but if they didn't force it onto him, he wouldn't have to do that. So them putting it there didn't do anything for the fire ants. It didn't do anything to him because he hosed it off, and all it done is create harm in the environment. So all these risk factors can accumulate to create negative outcomes. So site-specific environmental impact studies, risk assessment, and benefit detriment analysis would have not had prophylactic treatment on my property, and that's a fact. So I've been really desperate to try and stop this program. I started a bit of a social media campaign, obviously on Sarah's toxic page and that, but then I started thinking, well, after seeing Dr. Puckett on these clips, I started reaching out to some different people in America, because I've been over there, and I've been talking to Dr. Joshua King here. Been talking to him for a few months, and he says the same thing about. I actually sent him the costing and the reportings of what they claim with 6 deaths, and it's going to cost $600 million. It's just all rubbish. He says he doesn't agree with it, and a lot of people don't over there. So, but anyway, he's got a patent for this machine. I've got one built. I built one in Australia. It cost me $25,000. I've got one here. At the moment, they're not accepting water treatment because they don't think it works. This guy's got. Fire ants are the most researched insect in the world. There's continual federal funding in America to study fire ants, and this Florida University has a lot to do with their studies. So he's got a patent, and the university's got it, and it's just a low pressure 90 to 95 degree machine that you inject into the ground. It's not rocket science. And even him himself says they've been treating ants with hot water since the beginning of fire, I suppose. But anyway, so basically that's my next step to try and stop this program, is get this machine out treating fire ants and doing some videos of it, and just trying to put pressure on them because they're talking about these organic farms and this and that, giving them alternatives, and that's what I intend to do, to try and empower property owners to have a choice about what they want to do. So, yeah.
Thank you, Trevor. So, Josh King up there, so that's the guy, and make no mistake, he's an academic in a university over there. He's been doing this for 30 years, right? So he's the author of this letter. So Trevor's been talking with Joshua King for a while now over the alternate treatment program. So he wrote us a 3-page letter once he came to understand what the program was doing here in Australia. And he kind of summarised everything we concluded in 3 pages.
He couldn't believe, he couldn't believe, he couldn't believe what I was telling him. Like, he didn't believe it. Like, he says, "Oh, you can't." He says, "Can you prove what you're saying?" And I just sent him the link to the fire ant program, and then within 2 days he wrote me that. He just literally dumbfounded, you know, because originally they did the federal. He has had some people contacting him in the past, and in a couple of weeks of writing this, before we released this letter, he did have New South Wales contact him, but no one from Queensland or no one from this current program has contacted him, and he's a senior leader in fire ant management.
Yeah. So he's a man to be listened to. And Connie took us through some of these points earlier. But one of the key things was, will impact non-target ants. Reduction of native ant communities by this kind of program approach has repeatedly been shown to be a factor in hastening, not slowing, the invasion of fire ants. It's like damaging the immune system of the environment, its natural immune system. So we're taking away our environment's ability to fight off an invasive pest. We're doing it. There's something not right. All right. Can I introduce you to Jim Wilmot? From Property Rights Australia. Jim, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. Jim's got a very strong interest in this and a great angle for us to consider.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. I hail from Kingaroy off a beef property there. I've been involved in biosecurity actually. I was there working for Biosecurity Queensland since the mid-1995 to early 2000s. And I was actually there the day that they actually found or detected fire ants. Henry Palaszczuk was my minister. I've worked throughout Queensland for Department of Natural Resources, that's what it was called before Biosecurity Queensland. Done a lot of eradication programs for government, a lot of management programs for weeds, different feral pests, and worked in New South Wales. Made the silly mistake of coming down and working in the Minister's offices as a senior policy officer for biosecurity and natural resource management, and today I still do biosecurity consultancy, but also with a organisation, a volunteer organisation, grassroots, called Property Rights Australia. We've been around for 20 years, and we've got rural and urban people, and we stand up for people's property rights when they're under threat. And I'm the chair, been the chair for a couple of years, and so we believe that if you own private property, you should have exclusive use, exclusive access, and dare I say, the ability to make a profit off your land. And so if we just kick through, so I won't go into about how fire ants, we all know basically how they got there. If we just skip that slide. The eradication strategy, as you know, it's promoted the horseshoe strategy. There's been a few different maps over the last 23 years of the program of how it's been managed. As you know, this is the main one I really wanted to talk about, and it's a takeaway tonight. This is what they use for all This is the basis of biosecurity and how they manage all pest species. So if you look at prevention over here, and that's why we've got strong borders, we should always try and keep things out. Having strong borders, keeping weeds out, keeping pests out, because that's where you get the best rate of return on your investment. Because once they're in, it costs a lot of money. So that's where we should have stopped with fire ants, but of course they came in on containers.